Welcome everybody to Week in Review. Certainly these are turbulent times, and I count it an honor and a privilege to be able to impart things to you. I trust insights that will help you from a biblical worldview to be an informed influencer and really influence others. Make use of this video and articles that I and others do to help others. We have to help people be enlightened with what's really going on. You know, a number of years ago, I traveled to 31 cities to meet with pastors and leaders, and we were talking about the priority of the gospel, and number two, the responsibility of politics. That we have an awesome responsibility as salt and light, and that we need to, as leaders, make sure that people understand the issues of our day, and who is in the Oval Office really casts a tremendous shadow and has an awesome not only responsibility, but there are consequences if the wrong person is in that place. Now, we're surrounded today by propaganda. During World War II, there was a man, he was called the Minister of Propaganda. This was Hitler's right-hand man, Joseph Goebbels. Maybe you've read about him. Now, because of this man's success with propaganda, think about this, he put forth propaganda on Poland. That opened up the door and led to World War II. 100 million people probably died. The same thing he did was propaganda with Jewish people, which led to the Holocaust. 6 million or so died. Now, he had two major beliefs. He believed that the general population was relatively ignorant and uninformed. And number two, if you repeat a lie or a deception long enough, people will believe it. Well, I believe that we're in that kind of a situation today because of the corporate media, and we have individuals in the corrupt political realm that share propaganda on this nation, lies, and people are being deluded. I want to tell you about the three worst presidents and their impact, and then also the three best and their impact. Number one, I submit to you, there was a man, and then, well, you go back, I guess, 50, and his name was James Buchanan. Now, this was a man that was very inept. He should not have been the president. Well, he took office, and because of his ineptitude and his lack of skillful leadership, we saw the secession of states, which led to a civil war, which led to what? 750,000 Americans killed in that civil war. Now, James Buchanan was a man that was never married. When Pete Buttigieg was running for president, he said, hey, we've had homosexuals already, in the White House. He and others allegedly believed that James Buchanan was a homosexual. But he was also unskilled. He was an inept leader. And as a result of it, he also supported the Dred Scott decision, if you can believe that would say that blacks can't become, free and citizens in this nation. Well, that is a precedent and a negative impact on the nation. Another worst president, and I say there's three that I select, and I know historians will concur with much of what I say, is a man named Herbert Hoover. Now, Herbert Hoover was a man that came, 29? The stock market crashed, and we faced the Great Depression. But again, this was a man that was mean-spirited, he was uncaring, and he didn't believe that the government had much of a role at all in helping people. We're not talking of a handout, but giving a hand up to assist people. And as a result of it, we had millions of people out of their homes and out of jobs. And there were shanty towns all over this nation, and they actually nicknamed them in a derogatory way. They called them Hoovervilles. Yeah. And if you ever saw the musical Annie, you know there's a section in that musical where they're really putting down, at the time, Herbert Hoover, the president. This was a terrible president, and he was lacking in skill, and as a result of it, America suffered terribly. That's why when FDR came in, we saw change because there was skill in that man. Now, the third person that I submit to you is the worst in terms of a president is the present man in the White House, Joe Biden. Now, this is not just about high gas prices. This is not just about trying to get through COVID. Now, this man and his staff, his administration, is very deluded. and uses propaganda to make us believe certain things. But you know what? When we look at the situation in the Ukraine and with the first really war in European soil in 80 or so years, what caused this? What's behind all this? Well, you have to understand that when Mr. Biden was inaugurated, the very first act he made, an executive order, was to what? Undermine and devastate the oil, gas, and fuel industry in America. He became a pawn of the progressive left, those that are for the Green New Deal and those that say global warming, it's going to destroy this nation. Well, what's happened right now, if you think global warming is something in the 100 years from now or whatever it is, man, we're on the verge of a thermonuclear war. Man, you talk of global warming, they better come and face that, because that's what we're up against. Now, Biden didn't cause the war in Ukraine, but he emboldened Putin. And when he cut the energy, Mr. Biden, that just released Mr. Putin. Europe went to him for the oil, and we could have supplied it. We were energy independent. And as a result of that, look at the state of our nation. And now it's not only on the precipice of war, but Mr. Biden, look at the policies in terms of the border. It's a disaster. Look at what he's done in supporting abortion on demand, saying I'm a unifier. He's been a divider. He's been reckless. Look at the drugs, the fentanyl that have come in because of open borders. Look at what he's done in terms of COVID, boasting, I'm going to end it. And it was double that what it was under Donald Trump. And this is a man that is really, I think, unfit for office. As the doctor that actually, the physician for Mr. Trump and Mr. Obama said, he's unfit and he's on the world stage. And as a result of it, he didn't cause what's going on in this war, but you know what? He emboldened Mr. Putin, who is a madman. These are three individuals that they've had an impact on America, and America has suffered, and we're suffering. But you know what? When you pray and vote in the right kind of leader, things can be changed in the country. You look at number one. Who would I say is the best? Well, many historians would agree, Abraham Lincoln. Here's the great emancipator. Here's the man that wrote the Gettysburg Address. Here's a man whose values Republicans, Democrats will all like to talk about. And he's a man that brought freedom. He's a man that freed the slaves. He was a Christian. He was courageous. He was a Republican that was very conservative. And yes, he paid for things with his life as he was assassinated. But Mr. Lincoln was a godly man. There's about 145 statues of him all over America, and there's about 24 or so in other countries. He's associated with courage, character, and freedom, a strong Christian leader, probably the best. And look at the impact he had on the nation as the slaves were freed. I'll tell you next, George Washington, another courageous Christian. Yes, don't believe those that say, well, he wasn't a Christian. You read his life. And you know what? George Washington is known as the father of our country. He's a man that was the military leader, courageous, and hero of what? Leading the Continental Army to what? Defeat the biggest, strongest army in the world, the British. And so we came through the Revolutionary War. He became our first president. He became the leader and the president of our first constitutional convention, leading the way for our Constitution. Jefferson said, man, we can't do it basically without you. And this was a man that was a leader, and he had an impact on our nation, George Washington. Now, thirdly, I would submit, and people can say others, but I would submit Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was called the great communicator. When you look at California today and you say it's so liberal, they'll never have another conservative. Well, it was about 50 some years ago that Ronald Reagan for 2 terms was the governor. He was a courageous conservative. He talked of small government. He talked of conservatism, a strong military. And when he came into office, you have to understand where we were at. The Democrat president at that time was Jimmy Carter. Do you know what the mortgage rates were? 18.6%. It was a malaise. We had hostages in Iran for over a year. Do you know what the inflation was? It was 14.6%. It was a disaster. And Reagan came in and he rescued us from really the worst recession in 90 years. He restored our economy. He rebuilt our military. He worked as a real unifier. Now, Mr. Biden said, oh, I'm a unifier, but he's divided us horribly. But what did Mr. Reagan do? Well, with his beautiful personality and his strength, even though he was almost assassinated, he set a pace, and he worked with Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher of England, Pope John Paul II. He even would meet with the leader of the House of Representatives, a man named Tip O'Neill. They would be debating, but then they'd come together at the end of the day. Ronald Reagan was courageous. He wrote a book on the conscience of a nation, and he talked about the sanctity of human life. Ronald Reagan goes down in history as the man that really spoke up and brought about really the end of the Berlin Wall and communism, the Cold War. This man saved lives. This man was one of the best. Can you see the connection? If you have horrible presidents that are incapable or incapacitated or they're unfit, there's damage and destruction in a nation. We need godly leaders. I heard a man say, and I end with this, and I say, will you join with me? Make use of this video and commentaries and books. Help people. Bring light into the darkness. I heard a man say that America is filled with millions of poor people. He said poor is an acronym for passing over opportunities regularly. We don't want to be passing over opportunities in any way, in a regular way or at all. This is the time to shed the light. Join with me. Bring the truth, and let's shine the light in the darkness.